have a friend here, an American woman, and she came to Dharamsala the first time in 1965. She said she heard that there were Tibetans there. She took the bus and she ended up in Dharamsala. And she said, I didn't see anyone. There was nothing there. I spent a night in some shack and I left the next day because she couldn't even find where the Tibetans were.
Welcome back to Out of Tibet. My name is Tayap Namri Songtsen Lindop, and in this episode, we are traveling to the Dharamsala of the past, a place of tents and very simple homes. My guest is Tencho Gyatso, living in Washington, D.C. nowadays. She's the president of the International Campaign for Tibet and also the niece of the Dalai Lama. After she finished high school, she had to give up on her dreams and ran her family restaurant in India instead. Later, she joined the Tibetan parliament at just 25 years old. Her stories are very personal. What was it like growing up where elders had to be strict and where she had to shoulder heavy responsibilities from early on? Also, I wondered if she received any special treatment being part of the Dalai Lama's extended family. Before we begin, I'm doing this podcast in my own free time, and there's quite a lot of work and costs involved, so I would be very grateful if you'd consider supporting me. Please take a look at the show notes for how to do so. Thank you. Hey Tenjula, I would like to welcome you to Out of Tibet, and I want to start with a surprise. I will be introducing a new segment today, and I hope you're up for it. So please state your full name so I have all the details here.
Since I got married, I go by Tencho Gyatso.
And which year were you born, and where were you born?
1966, year of the fire horse in Dharamsala.
Firehouse sounds pretty good, I have to say. Yeah, there's always a little, I wouldn't say competition, but Tibetans always compare the signs. I think Firehouse is a cool one. I'm an earth rabbit.
My son is a rabbit, between a rabbit and a lion, because he was born in the Caspia.
Okay, so just in between. So he's both kind of. So continuing with your passport check. Which passport do you carry?
Now I carry a U.S. passport. But I was born in India, so we didn't have a passport. We carried the Indian travel document. It's not a passport per se, but it's what the government of India issues for refugees who are residents of India, and it's a travel document. Used that until I immigrated to the United States in the late 90s, and since then I've been carrying the U.S. passport.
Okay, and this travel document, I've heard about it many times. I've never really understood how it works. So you're saying all Tibetans who grew up or were born in India had this travel document?
So not just who are born in India, but who are living in India as refugees. When you travel abroad, you need some kind of international documentation that it's issued by the government of India. And in this case, it is we call it the Yellow Book.
The Yellow Book, yeah, the infamous Yellow Book.
Infamous Yellow Book. So this is what His Holiness travels on also.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It shows that you are a stateless, but you are a resident of India, and the Indian government has issued this booklet or this document for you to be able to travel. So you get visas on it, and you can travel with that.
And since when have you been carrying your American passport?
American passport, I immigrated to the United States around 1999 and applied for a U.S. passport. And maybe the early 2000s when I got the U.S. passport.
Was it easy to receive the passport?
Yes, yeah, because my husband already had a U.S. passport. So, and you're married to a U.S. citizen, then you're able to apply for citizenship based on that.
I wonder nowadays, is it still the same? Like in your case, your husband had the American passport and you'd come now from India to America. would it be as easy to receive the American passport?
Well, immigration regulations change under different administrations. I haven't looked into too deeply, but there are many questions around immigration regulations. So I think it'll be more challenging for those who are looking at immigration today in the United States than it was back then.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very challenging right now. I think in many parts of the world. And so coming back to the personal details, do you have a nickname?
Nickname in school, well, I'm tall as compared to usual Tibetans, so I think they used to call me Lambu, which means tall in Hindi, in Indian language.
So I guess your old friends, when they meet you, they will still call you Lambu.
Not really. I don't think. I remember once when I went to a tailor shop in Majnukatila in Delhi, my friend and I, in Majnukatila, you can go. There are these Indian tailors who specialize in Tibetan chuba, and you pick the material and then they measure you up, and then they sew it up and you can pick it up in an hour or two. So I went there with my friend and he didn't think I spoke Hindi. So I heard him calling out to the other tailors and said, Amitabh Bachchan ka naap lo, meaning Amitabh Bachchan is a tall Indian actor. So he said, measure this up, Amitabh Bachchan.
I mean, but that's always the best. If you go along with somebody and they don't think you can speak a language, you actually understand it. The question, of course, then remains, did you tell them that you spoke Hindi or did you not say anything?
Yes, I burst out laughing and I asked, who are you calling Amitabh Bachchan? He thought it was very funny.
I do know these situations. I once had the situation with my sister. We went to America many years ago and we were on an elevator and some Germans came in, and that was like 30 years ago. And they just started talking in German, and obviously we understood everything. And my sister and I were actually waiting for them to say something bad about us, and then we could have intervened, but they were really nice. So Lambu is a nickname. Did you like that nickname, or was that annoying to you?
I didn't mind it. It was all right. We grew up at a time when everybody had nicknames. So some had crazy nicknames. I don't think in Tibetan culture, nicknames are not necessarily, I grew up at TCV in Dharamsala in the Tibetan school. So I think as kids, we were very straightforward and no mincing words.
Sometimes nicknames can be meant in an affectionate way, even though the real word is kind of maybe not so positive. But yeah. And the final question I have, what is your record of momos you've ever eaten in one session?
I don't remember.
You never counted as a child?
We used to count. I mean, when my brother, sister, and sibling cousins, we all would gather and we would nick off a little corner of the momo and put it on the side of the plate, and we would count.
When I was small, I thought this was such a clever idea to count momos. Only when I got older, I realized that's such an easy way to cheat. Just put more, because somehow it was important to me and to my children nowadays as well. It's important for them to see how many momos somebody's eaten, and I kind of understand but don't at the same time. Well, there you go. So we've got the formalities done. I will be introducing a new segment. I've called it That's So Cliché. A big thank you for inspiring this new segment to Frank, my dear friend and fellow podcaster of Halbe Kartoffel, where he talks with Germans who are of non-German origin. I've prepared some statements and I would like you to, just to react to them and on what you think of them. So with no further ado, the first cliché I have is, your childhood was probably just butter tea, momos, and exile politics.
I grew up with butter tea, Indian tea, momos on occasion, because we grew up in those days, meat wasn't as plentiful as it is now. So momos were a very special dish. And exile politics, Dharamsala, that we grew up in the heart of exile politics.
I really have to step up my game here for this new segment. Otherwise, it's going to be a very short running segment. So the second one I have prepared for you. TCV students are all super disciplined and slightly terrified of authority.
TCV students, yeah. I think TCV, we were seen as disciplined students, I think, compared. And we grew up with authority also because it's a boarding school. And many of our teachers were also coming from a background from Tibet, where elders have to be strict. And we were growing up at a time when the parents would go to our teachers, even my parents included, would go to the teachers and say, please be strict with our kids and bring them up with discipline. Only few of us were there who were day scholars, who had parents and lived with family. And the rest of the students were all boarding school students, and many of them were orphans and semi-orphans. So TCV was structured to be a school that had the semblance of a home. So you had, instead of boys and girls separated in dorms, they had the structure of homes where there would be a certain number of boys and girls in each of the homes. And there were home parents who would take care of each of the homes. And it was like brothers and sisters living in homes. And in the morning you go to school and you have classes. And then you go back to your homes in the evening. And in the homes, the home parents would take care of all the children's needs. And then later on, as the children got older, they also created a separate boys' hostel and the girls' hostel for the older kids. So that when you go into, I think it was around 9th grade is when you moved to the hostel units from 9th to 12th grade.
As the niece of the Dalai Lama, you never allowed yourself to get into trouble.
I did get into trouble.
Okay, now.
But I did not stand for any positions of authority because it was easier to be in the background, and then it didn't matter if I got into trouble or not.
So you would say you were kind of mischievous, but in a clever way. You didn't get caught.
I was more of a tomboy, I think. I enjoyed playing games and I read a lot.
We've already done 3 cliches. The 4th one is you've had tea with half the Tibetan government by now.
I think I've had tea with most of the Tibetan government leaders now. Every meeting is you serve tea, so any meeting you are, that's the Tibetan custom. Ceremonies begin with tea.
Imagine you were Tibetan and you didn't like tea. There would be a slight problem.
These days, you have the choice of butter tea or sweet tea.
Oh, yeah. Which one do you prefer?
Oh, and they serve green tea as well. I think it depends on the weather. Warmer weather, Indian tea, and colder weather, I think butter tea always, hands down.
I think that's the answer of a real connoisseur. Depends on the weather. It depends on my emotional state. But I can feel you. And also, when butter tea is not good, it's really difficult to drink. If butter tea is great, it's really great. And with like black tea or sweet chai, I mean, if it's bad, I can still drink it. You know what I mean? The difference between good and bad is way bigger with Tibetan butter tea. I've had amazing butter tea.
I think the test would be if you have butter tea in Tibet with real butter.
Yes, I have had real Tibetan butter tea in Tibet. So we were in Tibet, my father and I. And we served tea. I was very thirsty and I like butter tea in general. So I was going to drink it and he looked at me and said in German, so no one understood. He said, "Don't drink it. It's old butter. And you will get a tummy ache or your stomach will be upset." And I put it away. So he just knew what was good or what was bad. So I didn't drink that. But then again, have you had just butter? Like magu, it's called, right? In Tibetan. You just have butter. And I didn't know that. They served it in some monastery in Tibet. And I thought it was butter tea. And when I was drinking, I realized I'm drinking fat.
No, I've never had that, but I've heard that is a preferred drink in calm areas.
Yeah, I think it's very filling, obviously. So coming back and to close out this new segment that's so cliche is Tibetans are always calm, kind, and never angry, right?
Completely cliche. No, but I think compared to our Western friends, they probably consider us calm, you know. I mean, I don't think of myself as very calm, but everybody says, "Oh, you're so calm, you're so calm." Maybe mood-wise, we don't, get, so happy with something and so depressed when something doesn't work. We kind of keep a balanced attitude. Maybe that's the plus and minus of our Tibetan upbringing.
Yeah, what I've experienced is that some of us, and certainly me as well, we tend to be like volcanoes. Now, something kind of annoys me, and I might not say anything. I'll just eat it up, and then I'll just internalize it. And then if it gets too much, suddenly I'll burst out like a volcano and be super angry for a minute or so, and afterwards I'll calm down. I think it's not very healthy. But and when I was preparing these cliches, I asked my daughter what she thinks of these cliches, and when I said no, Tibetans are never angry and so forth, she looked at me and said, "Actually, I've never met a Tibetan who is angry." But yeah, I think it's all in the way of perception. So okay, so that closes out this new segment. That's so cliche, and we'll jump right back to you, Tenjela. You said you grew up in Dharamsala. Did you do all your classes in Dharamsala up until the end?
Yes, I was born in Dharamsala at a time my mother had just taken over the running of TCV school. And my mother, she went to school in Darjeeling, in one of the convent schools that they have, missionary schools there in India, where they teach in English language. And I think she was debating what school to send her children to. And in the end, she said if she were to put her heart and mind into the education for refugee children, then her children should also be in this school so that she gave it the best priority and effort that she possibly could. So that was kind of a decision that she made. And myself and both my siblings, three of us, grew up in TCG, in the school there. And I think that was some of the most beautiful memories that I have of growing up. And TCV, in some ways, the school had limited resources, but at the same time, we had so much love and care of the elders, and the whole community in Dharamsala grew up in the midst of that. So I'm really grateful I have that.
Did you like going to school?
Oh, I loved going to school. My mother's house was just at the bottom of the hill where the school is. Because the school is a boarding school, they have programs that start from 7 o'clock till 7 p.m., where actual classes were from 9 to 4.
That's a full day.
It's a full day. I mean, I don't know how the school authorities worked out those schedules back then, but you would start off in early morning with the prayer and then study hour, and then a little break, and then school would start. And then afternoon, there would be games and activities. And then in the evening again, you had study hour and prayer hour. And me and my siblings, I would be up by before 7 o'clock and run up to school up the hill at 7 o'clock and not be home until 7:38.
So, I mean, you really loved going to school. I mean, going there before school even started. That's crazy. How would you describe Dharamsala, comparing it back then when you grew up and now? Is it very different?
Yes. I mean, Dharamsala, back when we were growing up, Dharamsala didn't have anything except the Tibetan community up there. Any shopping, anything we had to do, we had to go to Lower Dharamsala, where all the main shops were. I have a friend here, an American woman. She had traveled to Nepal with the Peace Corps in the early 60s. And she came to Dharamsala the first time in 1965.
Wow.
And she said she heard that there were Tibetans there. She took the bus and she ended up in Dharamsala. And she said, I didn't see anyone. There was nothing there. I spent a night in some shack and I left the next day because she couldn't even find where the Tibetans were. Yeah, so Dharamsala back then was just woods, and Tibetans were, at that time, mostly in tents, and few British houses were there. And in those, the government offices were there, His Holiness residence, His Holiness, his whole family, and the whole entourage. They were in like just one British style bungalow. The TCV school was just starting. I remember one big house there, and everybody would used to be lined up and living there, And from there, it slowly grew. Today's Dharamsala is huge compared to back then. Now you go and you see how busy and all the buildings close by. You get a lot of local Indian tourists as well these days. I think Dharamsala, over the years, many changes. So the 60s were like that. The 70s were when the first of the hippies, those who were interested in Tibetan Buddhism, who were going to the East in search of some kind of personal enlightenment. Yes, many of them came to Dharamsala and started going to the Tibetan library, and that's when Dharamsala became a little bit of a hub for those Westerners. And then I think it was around 2000 or so when the Himachal government built a big cricket stadium. And cricket, as you know, is very popular in India. And they had a huge cricket match, I think, between India and Pakistan there that put Dharamsala on the spotlight for Indian tourists. And that's when there are a lot of, tourists from India started coming to Dharamsala. And especially Jammu and Kashmir were closed then and people were going to Manali. But those who used to go to the traditional Simla and Jammu and Kashmir and Kulu Manali areas, they started coming to Dharamsala. If you go in the summer months when it's hot and humid in the plains, the weekend tourists come up and you get traffic jam that gets stuck for 2-3 hours on the road.
I wonder if there's a Tibetan cricket team.
Actually, there is, The Tibetans in America here, because I was in Minnesota last year and they started playing cricket. And they were with some expat with Indians and Nepali and Tibetans. I think they have a couple of teams and they had a trophy in my mother's name also. So they have a tournament there every year.
So it's called the Jezubema Trophy.
Cricket trophy.
Oh, okay. And coming back to Dharamsala back then, did you feel like you were living in India, or what did it feel like to be there in Dharamsala?
That's a good question, because we were really going to TCV.
Everything was Tibetan, right?
Everything was Tibetan. Yeah? Yes, everything was Tibetan. Our school, we were there, and morning to night, all the teachers were Tibetan. We had few Indian teachers who would teach some of the higher classes or who taught Hindi, because we studied Hindi also. The curriculum was based on the Indian government's curriculum. But the Tibetans were able to, up to a certain 5th or 6th grade, you could have your own curriculum. Then once you got into middle school, then you have to go by the Indian curriculum because you have the 10th grade exam that is all India that you have to take.
Oh, if you want to continue with higher learning, for example.
Yes. So at 10th grade, there's an exam that you take called CBSE that everyone in India, 10th grade, takes that exam. Based on that, you can apply to universities and other places. But otherwise, in the younger classes, the Tibetans were able to have curriculum based on our needs.
And did you already know when taking that exam what you were going to do afterwards?
I didn't know. I wanted to actually go to do dentistry at one point.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But circumstances didn't allow me that. Now, my father was in the restaurant business, and my mother spent all her, effort at TCV, and my father used to be the income provider for our family. But my father passed away, so I had to take over running of the restaurants and things that he used to do. After I graduated, I think I was 17 when he passed away.
And then you took over the restaurant, and you're running the restaurant from that age on.
From 21, yes.
Were you okay with that?
Well, I had my mother who helped me, and then we had really good people who worked at the restaurant. No, it was a good experience for me because in some ways it was challenging also. A woman running a business in India is not easy. It's a very male dominated business and society. But I think I grew up with some strong women in our family. And being the eldest in the family, you always have to kind of learn to deal with,
There's kind of adversity, right? I mean, what kind of adversity were you facing as a young woman running this restaurant?
Yeah, running a business or running any business in India is not without challenges. And then there you also have a lot of employees. Compared to West and running a business in the West, you have to do a lot yourself. India, in some ways, there you can have a lot of employees and people working for you. But at the same time, you have all the employee issues, Running a restaurant means 24/7, 7 days a week.
I think many people underestimate the restaurant business, because I've heard of cases where people say, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to open a restaurant. But after half a year, they have to close shop again because they didn't know how difficult this is logistically.
Life just took me along. But I think also I'm very hands-on. So for me, it was, okay, if I'm running a restaurant, I'm there, in the kitchen with the chefs, on the floor with the other people working. It was just teamwork that helped. And people my dad had employed, they all loved him. So when I came on, I think they also took me on. And so it was kind of, you did what you had to do to survive.
You know what? I've heard this quite often, not just in this podcast, but also personally from Tibetans, that many of us just are content where life takes them. Because maybe it's just going back to 1959 when Tibetans had to escape or seek refuge abroad. We were dealt very bad cards and we knew we just had to do whatever it takes. Maybe that is something that has been instilled into the Tibetanness that the elders certainly witnessed themselves and maybe transferred part of it to us.
But also it's responsibility. Because you had so many things that, you knew somebody had to pick it up and shoulder it. We didn't have as many opportunities as we do today. Today it's also not easy, but the younger generation today have a lot more options before them because their parents are more settled. And that way, their parents are not dependent on the children to have to pick up their weight, so they have the space to look at what opportunities they have and go forward with their dreams. But here, I think when maybe my generation and those older than me, we had to pick up the roles of our elders also because they were doing so much more than caring for the community and having to serve the community and do other things. But for myself, actually looking back, it was a time when I learned a lot. And we really had, again, a really wonderful team of many of the people who worked at the restaurant that my father built were all Tibetans who came there and it was a job for them. They gave them food and money to support their families. And it was one of the restaurants that people used to come from all across India to even now. I get sometimes people who say, from Bangalore, I know Rice Bowl restaurant. I used to go there.
And speaking of options, back then, did you allow yourself to dream?
Yeah, you know what? Of course we do. I wanted to do something to, not just run the business, but to something for our community. And that's always been something that I think our generation has grown up with, wanting to serve the community. It was around the time when His Holiness, there was a meeting in Dharamsala, and the decision was made that members of the Kashak would be elected by what used to be called the Tsokje, when members from Tibetan community from all around India would come to Dharamsala once every 2 years for this meeting. And in that meeting, they expanded the parliament to the Tibetan parliament in exile from 12 members who were appointed by His Holiness to 40 plus members who would be elected by the Tibetan population. populace. And so my name came up in that. And that time it was, when they expanded it, you could elect 10 members from each of the 3 provinces and 2 members from each of the religious sects. So it was 40 plus 3 appointed by His Holiness. So that was the consistency of the first Tibetan Parliament in exile. And then I came to know that in the first round of elections from the different sects, there were 2 seats reserved for women. And so my name came up, and then I heard all the others were withdrawing their names. So I said, okay, maybe my destiny lies in that as well. And it was something I wanted to do. Also, it was something that it offered me, aside from doing something for the family and running the business, that I could be of service to His Holiness and the Tibetan people. But I was really quite young. I was only 25 and I barely knew much about the workings of Dharamsala. So I learned a lot, and I'm very grateful to those who were with me there who, helped me in learning how to be a contributing member up there.
Yeah, but then again, you were facing up to the task of being responsible or feeling responsible and doing that. I mean, you come from a very remarkable family. Your mother, Jitu Pamela, and your uncle is the Dalai Lama. So you're running a business and being on the parliament at the same time, or did you give up the restaurant?
No, I didn't give up the restaurant because it was only during parliament sessions you had to go up. So I could do both. And that was why that became possible. But I think to your question, I think as a member of His Holiness family, of course, you have the honor of being in that family. But I think it was instilled in us, even as a young child, that does not give you the right to have any privileges. You have to carry your own weight. So we grew up really hands-on, and my mother also, in her work at TCV, she used to do everything. And that was an example for us. I think the soccer ground that TCV has now, the school ground was being built, and all the staff and students would take turns in the afternoons to go and work. And to set an example, my mother also would herself come and work there with everyone else. So I think I grew up with a family who were all hardworking and who all, were believed in not just talking, walking and doing the talk.
That's what makes a good leader, leading by example, right? And that makes a difference. Even though you didn't look for privileges or anything, was there a moment when you realized your family was not totally ordinary?
Well, growing up in Dharamsala, you grew up close to His Holiness, and being right there, I think we were lucky. And my grandmother was also there. So, we always had this special connection. But at the same time, I spent most of my time at TCV school. And in the school, we were all wearing the same blue pants and checkered shirt and, the bata chapel and running around. I don't think you could tell any one of us apart. I think we learned to separate those two lives very easily. So, you had the privilege of being in that family, but at the same time, we were also ordinary. We lived ordinary lives. And, we grew up with all the... Also, my mother, I think, made it very clear. Now, we didn't do, elaborate birthdays or anything. We were treated just like any of the other kids. We didn't get big pocket monies or anything. She made sure that we didn't stand out as well.
So you're living there in this very Tibetan community. There were very few Indians, you were saying back then. But nevertheless, you were still guests in the country of India, right? Was there ever a moment where you felt unwanted or kind of uneasy being there?
I think, no, Dharamsala, because we are, the community, it's kind of like in a bubble. Once you're up there, even most foreigners who come to Dharamsala will say, oh, you reach there and it's like a bubble outside of India,
Yeah, especially when you come from Delhi, where it's so loud, right? And you come, Dharamsala is so different.
It's a bubble. But, India is beautiful and India has its own, charm, but also for Tibetans, once you're in the bigger Indian cities, and you're not one of them. You do stand out a little bit. But at the same time, Tibetans have been able to make a niche for ourselves in India.
What kind of image do Tibetans actually have in India?
Well, many different. I think, as I was saying, the niche is one, all the different monasteries and settlements and things. So Tibetans are seen as Buddhists, and the monasteries and the Buddhas, and so there's that
very religious.
The religious aspect of it. And then the other way that Tibetans work to make a livelihood in India was they took up the sweater selling business.
Yes, sweater.
Yeah, sweater selling. One of the things that I'm not sure how it started off, but what Tibetans started to do as a way of livelihood was they found out the sweater factories in Ludhiana, which is not too far from where the Dharamsala is. It's a couple of hours by train there. And they would go there, and from the factories, they would buy, or even at some point, this factory owner started trusting the Tibetans, where you could go and get your supply for the winter. And then you take these down to the plains of India and sell them. And that became a source of business, where Tibetans were doing this multiple cities all across India, and very successfully. They became known for these markets, Tibetan markets, where they would sell sweaters and woolen items. And I think the Indians thought, because they were being sold by Tibetans, that it looked more authentic, or the wool was more real. I'm not sure. But and then the third place was also food. The Momo and Tukpa places that Tibetans
your restaurant
up.
business, for example?
Yeah. Our restaurant business also was, that was the other area. They became known for the food.
So you were running the restaurant. You were in the parliament. So what happened next?
After that, then my husband and I got married, and he was working in advertising, and he decided to work in Delhi. And then I moved to Delhi also, and I worked at the Tibet House in Delhi. My younger brother took over the restaurant. So that still was a family business for a while. And then I was in Delhi for a while, working at Tibet House under Dharamsala. Spent another 2 years there. And then we moved to the States after that.
So what did that feel like? You were in Delhi working at Tibet House, and then you decided to move to America.
Yes, we had our son. So once you have a child, then I think
things
you
change.
Start looking at things differently. Because at that point, I wasn't ready to move to America. In fact, we were planning to stay on in India until our son came along. And then we said, maybe we move to the States where it'll be easier. And plus, I was carrying a Tibetan yellow passport. My husband had he's Tibetan, but he had a US passport. So it's not easy to live in India as well. So we moved to the States, and we started a Tibetan restaurant in New York City.
Okay, what was it called?
It was called Tibet on Houston.
Are you laughing because all the good memories, or of all the bad memories?
It was, very good memories of that. We had a really nice team. But just the strangeness of it, right? Moving from India, opening up a restaurant in New York City. And we were there when 9/11 happened, all of that. So we were there. But raising a child, far from our roots in New York.
Because suddenly the Tibetanness was gone, right? Was there a Tibetan bubble in New York for you?
Yes, our restaurant was a Tibetan bubble.
Okay.
My husband, we had the perfect little bubble. Actually, our son, even though born in New York, he didn't speak any English until he was 2.5. When we sent him to daycare, that's when he first started speaking English. So we both spoke Tibetan.
The same with me. My parents told me I started speaking German when I was 4.
Yes. So you had good roots. And I think that helps when your pronunciation and all that. And then we had a small group of Tibetans who had young children. And one of them was Adam York and Dechen also. So together we started a little weekend school for Tibetans. So I used to teach the little kids there. We had like 6 little kids.
And did you also mingle with Americans?
Only after he started going to preschool. Before that, restaurant business is just hands-on, full-time.
How many Tibetans were there in New York back then?
Back then, there was just starting the Tibetan community in New York. The 1,000 immigration had happened, so it had increased sizably, but still small compared to now.
So when you were in New York, what motivated you to keep going? Was it again the responsibility for your family?
No, that time, then I think it was just more of an adventure of how do we make this life work for us. We were in New York a couple of years, and you figure it out. You make decisions based on what is possible and what you have within your range of possibility, and you move forward.
I think this podcast should be called How to Be Resilient, the way you speak. Mental health, Tibetan mental health. So we have to start wrapping up, unfortunately. You were running the restaurant in New York. What happened afterwards, like chronologically speaking? What were your next steps up until now when you've become the president of the International Campaign for Tibet?
So from New York, we decided we wanted to move somewhere where it's nicer for place to raise a young child. And then we moved to Boulder, Colorado. My husband had always wanted to, one of us had to stay home and look after our child who was 3 years old then. So my husband always wanted to do art. So he decided to stay home and look after our son. And then I'd never worked really in a corporate world. So I said I would go out, and I started working in banking. So I did everything from, tailoring to customer service, to lending, to loans, to mortgages, to running as a small bank manager of a small bank. We did that for a couple of years. And then my son was older, and then my husband said, okay, now let me look at what else is out there. And he decided to work for Voice of America Radio, and that brought us to Washington. And I started volunteering here at International Campaign for Tibet after we moved here. And that's how John Ackley, who was then president, he said, oh, who is this woman who runs up and down the steps with? And he said, why don't you start working? I don't need volunteers. And that's how I started here 16, 17 years ago, and leading to now as president of ICT.
Comparing all these CVs of Tibetans, I think this is a crazy CV, but it totally makes sense now, the way you talk about it, right? And I would love to talk about it more. Maybe we'll have another chance in another episode to talk about more your activism part. That will be interesting. But for now, I think we'll have to wrap it up for time constraints. But thank you very much for being a part of this. And allow me this final question. If you could write a letter to your own 18-year-old TCV kid or 17-year-old TCV kid, what would you say to that kid?
Myself at 18, what would I say to myself at 18? I think I would don't worry too much, because I think I was a little bit of a worrier to spend too much things planning. And I think, given everything, I think you have to work hard. And when you work hard, the results would show. One of the conversations that I had with my mother, I was asking her, what was one of the most important advices that you've had? And she said that there used to be this Kongotarala. Kongotarala would tell her, it doesn't matter what you do. You have to do it really well so that you can leave an impact. And I think that's what it is. Whatever you do, you try to do your best and you leave your mark. And I think that shows, that comes through after.
Thank you very much, Angela. I hope you enjoyed this Out of Tibet podcast. Before you leave, I want to let you know that I'm doing this podcast in my own free time, and I pay for all the equipment and software needed for recording or brushing up the audio. Therefore, it'd be great if you'd consider supporting me financially on my Patreon or PayPal, so I can continue making more free podcasts for you guys. Please check the show notes for all the details how to support this podcast financially. And if you don't happen to have any money to spare, I would love it if you'd subscribe, give this podcast 5 stars, left a positive review with Spotify, Apple, or wherever you are listening. Thank you very much in advance and hope to see you in Tibet.